On camera, the exact moment Mojtaba is portrayed as unleashing havoc on US bases across the region. Our iron fists will strike until your destruction and expulsion from the region, Iran's warning declares in a message aimed at the US. Mojtaba's missiles are being framed as carrying a bold and direct message for Trump after the latest escalation. The IRGC echoes Iranian calls for the US military to leave the region after what it describes as a defeat. Iran says its retaliation has begun, warning Washington that any further military action will come at a far greater cost. The Revolutionary Guards say multiple American facilities were targeted as Tehran expands its response across the region. Iran claims a coordinated operation struck key US military positions stretching across the Gulf and beyond. The latest exchange marks one of the most significant escalations since the current US-Iran confrontation began. Tehran says American bases across several countries are now within the scope of its expanding retaliation. Iran claims strategic US military assets were targeted as fears grow of a wider regional conflict. Tehran is signaling that any new American strikes could trigger even broader attacks across the region. IRGC statement read, and I quote, "Four important targets were hit at the airbase and command center of the child-killing American army in Al-Azraq, Jordan." Following the successful operation of the IRGC Navy in hitting 21 targets in American air and naval bases in the region and shooting down an MQ-9 drone in the skies of Jam County, and in view of the enemy's continued mischief, in completing the retaliatory operation, the forces of Islam and the brave fighters of the IRGC Aerospace Force, using their long-range solid-fuel missiles, targeted and destroyed four important targets, including the hangars of F-35 fighter jets at the airbase and command center of the child-killing American army in Al-Azraq, Jordan. Our forces are ready for a crushing and decisive response to any renewed aggression by the enemy, and the consequences of any renewed aggression will be the responsibility of the American enemy." Unquote. Meanwhile, reports emerged of fresh attacks targeting US military bases in Bahrain and Kuwait, signaling a further escalation in the rapidly widening confrontation. Iran claims its latest retaliatory strike directly targeted the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, marking a major escalation in the Gulf confrontation. The IRGC is warning that American military installations across the Middle East remain vulnerable if Washington continues its military campaign against Iran. Iran says its retaliation extended beyond Bahrain, with missile and drone attacks also targeting US military facilities in Kuwait. Tehran claims long-range missiles struck key targets at the Al-Azraq airbase in Jordan, where American forces maintain a strategic presence. Iran has vowed a crushing response to any further US attacks, signaling that its retaliatory campaign could widen across the region if tensions continue to rise. Iran International Report said, and I quote, "Iran's Revolutionary Guard said they struck four key targets at the US Al-Azraq airbase in Jordan, including what they described as F-35 fighter shelters and a command and control center." In a statement carried by Fast News, the IRGC said the attack was part of a continuing retaliatory operation following earlier strikes by its naval forces on US facilities in the region and the reported downing of a US MQ-9 drone over Bushehr province. The Guard said their aerospace force used long-range solid-fuel missiles to target and destroy four sites at the base. The IRGC warned that Iranian forces remain prepared to deliver a decisive and crushing response to any further attacks and said responsibility for the consequences of future military action would rest with the United States. Unquote. Iran has warned Washington of consequences after US strikes near the Strait of Hormuz, vowing retaliation and raising fears of a wider regional conflict. After President Trump ordered retaliatory strikes over the downing of a US Apache helicopter, Tehran responded with fresh threats and military action, escalating tensions across the Gulf. As CENTCOM wrapped up its strikes against Iranian targets, Tehran claimed to have launched attacks on US bases, signaling that the confrontation is far from over. US CENTCOM statement read, and I quote, "US Central Command, CENTCOM, forces completed self-defense strikes against Iran, June 9th, at the Commander-in-Chief's direction in response to yesterday's downing of a US Army Apache helicopter. CENTCOM forces struck Iranian air defense, ground control stations, and surveillance radar sites near the Strait of Hormuz with precision munitions from US Air Force and Navy fighter jets. The operation was a proportional response to recent attacks on US forces and international commercial ships transiting regional waters. US forces remain vigilant and postured to defend against unjustified Iranian aggression." Unquote. While CENTCOM says its operation is complete, Iran's Revolutionary Guard has signaled that its response is only beginning, with U.S. military bases across the region now firmly in its sights. Iran's Qadam al-Anbiya Central HQ statement read, and I quote, "In response to the aggression of the terrorist American army in areas of southern Iran under the false pretext of their helicopter crashing, several U.S. bases in the region have been targeted by a powerful assault from the heroic army of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the brave warriors of the IRGC. The criminal U.S. Army should know that if it repeats any aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, more severe and extensive strikes will be carried out against the designated target bank in the region." Unquote. Trump's so-called self-defense strikes after the Apache loss appear to have faltered almost as soon as they began. Another MQ-9 drone has reportedly been downed by the IRGC in Jam City, in Iran's Bushehr province. On camera, IRGC air defenses appear to intercept an American drone as U.S. battlefield losses mount. Mojtaba appears to begin his revenge campaign as the first missile is launched from Iran amid renewed aggression. Multiple U.S. airstrikes rock Iran as Trump fumes over the reported downing of an Apache near Hormuz. Trump appears to hit back at Mojtaba after the U.S. helicopter loss escalates tensions in the Gulf. Trump confirms retaliatory strikes after Iran is blamed for the first reported Apache hit of the conflict. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I have just been informed by our great military that last night the Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must of necessity respond to this attack. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Unquote. CENTCOM launches what it describes as self-defense strikes against Iranian targets amid renewed confrontation. War flares again in the Middle East just days after the latest Iran-Israel clash raised hopes of restraint. The US targets Iran in what is being framed as a proportional response after containing Israeli pressure. US Central Command said, and I quote, "US Central Command, CENTCOM, forces began launching self-defense strikes against Iran at 5 p.m. ET today at the Commander-in-Chief's direction, in response to yesterday's downing of a U.S. Army Apache helicopter. The mission is a proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression." Unquote. New blasts are reported at multiple Iranian military sites as the confrontation widens again. Southern Iran comes under fire after the U.S. retaliation linked to the Apache incident. Trump's response is being portrayed as a desperate move as the fragile ceasefire begins to fray again. Iran International citing Iranian media and officials reported, and I quote, "U.S. military forces struck several Iranian air defense batteries and radar systems around the Strait of Hormuz. One projectile impact has been confirmed in Sirik and several others on Keshem Island. The U.S. airstrikes targeted Iran's Sirik and Jask naval bases, an air defense position in Bandar Abbas, coastal missile batteries in Minab and Keshem, and the port of Keshem. Explosion sounds were heard in the vicinity of the southern Iranian port city of Jask." Unquote. The Hormuz flashpoint ignites fresh fire as the IRGC says it will deliver a response. Iran's top diplomat warned U.S. forces to leave the region before the latest strikes intensified the crisis. Abbas Araghchi said, and I quote, "Despite its defeats on the battlefield, the U.S. opted to test our determination. Our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered. Leave our region if you want to be safe. History of the Persian Gulf has many chapters on dire fates of intruding outsiders." Unquote.